Haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Kuf Yud Amud Beis. Starting with Daf Kuf Yud Amud Aleph. 3 lines from the bottom. The Gemara continues to discuss the niyanim of kshofim and shadim and zugois, mazikin, and the Gemara begins now with how to save oneself from women sorcerers. Says the Gemara, Amar Ameimar, Amro li rishtini the noshim kashvonois. The woman who was in charge of those women sorcerers, she had said to me, Hai man de poga behu benoshim kashboniois. Those who come in contact with women sorcerers, neimahochi, they should say to them as follows: Chori chamimi bedikula bazayo. Hot excrement that is held in a ripped up basket, should be in the mouth, in your mouth, of the women sorcerers. The hair shall be pulled out of your head, causing balding. And those things that are pieces of bread should be blown away by the wind. Ibadur tavlinuchai, and may those spices also then be scattered about. These are the things that the sorcerers used in their sorcery. In other words, it doesn't have intrinsic strength necessarily, but they nonetheless, they give praise to these things. So it says, Parcha zika lemoriko chadeto dinan kisu noshim mish kashvoniois. Goes on to say that may the wind below the fresh type of spices of saffron, and may the women that are noshim, that are women of sorcerers, grab onto it. May the wind blow them away. Adachaininu v'chananchi loy asisi legoy. As long as I had my chain and also your chain, that means I didn't come in contact with you. Lo asisu legoy, I didn't come literally in your presence. Hashto, however, now the asisi legoy karchanani v'chananchi. Now, however, I have come in your presence, then the chain that I had for you has cooled off, and the chain for myself, because I came in contact, wasn't careful with you, has also cooled off. The Gemara says in the west, in Eretz Yisrael, they were not makpid, they weren't particular, concerned about zugim. Rav Dimi meneherdo kapid afilu arushma dechaviso. Rav Dimi, however, from Nerdo in Bavel, he was concerned about even the markings that were made on the barrels of wine. They would measure the wine in terms of the amounts of the wine, and those measurements that were then marked out, he was concerned that if they were zugim, if they were pairs, that would also be problems of causing mazikin. Indeed, there was a ma'aseh that took place, and the chavisa exploded as a result of zugim. Klala de Milsa, the Gemara tells us the following general principle: called the kapid kapti behadei, the lo kapid behadei, umi ulemechash mi boy. The principle is those who are overly concerned and particular about these zugos, then the zugos have effect on him. They will be particular with him. But if he is not particular with them, then they will not be particular with him. However, he should be concerned, and others at least watchful, as not to be then damaged by them. Says the Gemara weiter, Kiyasa Rav Dimi Omar, Rav Dimi came, he said, Shtei beitzim v'shtei egoizim shtei kishuin v'davar acher halacha l'mosh misinai. Rav Dimi, who we saw before, was even makbid on zugois when it comes to the lines that were made on the barrels. So he made the following statement. He said 2 eggs, 2 walnuts, 2 gourds, and v'davar acher, and 2 of something else, is halacha Moshe Misinai. Now, whether that means dafka halacha Moshe Misinai or it doesn't mean dafka, it just means it has the strength of halacha Moshe Misinai. One has to be careful from these for zugos. However, mistapka lahul rabbanon my mihu davar acher. The chachamim were not sure; they were in doubt. What is he meaning when it says davar acher? What is the davar acher? And therefore, v'gazu rabbanon bikulu zugi mishum davar acher. All of the zugim have been then made a gezerah against because we're not sure what is davar acher. Maybe because this is some sort of peiros that we're not aware of, some sort of oichel that we're not aware of. Therefore, everything then has the problem of zugois. On the previous Amud, we said when it comes to the concern of being damaged by shadim, then there's no such concern of zugois. When it comes to 10, there the Gemara explained because 10, after all, was enacted by Chazal for making 10 koisos of yayin for the Avelim, and then also there wasn't a problem, as different Amorim said, for 8, 6, and 4, because Birkas Kohanim begins Yivarechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha, that's 3, and therefore the 4th can't be a concern, because therefore the 3 words of Birkas Kohanim will already break it up. So too with the next statement of Birkas Kohanim, as it says, Yo'er Hashem ponav elecha v'chuneka. That's 5. So therefore, the 6th is also broken up, and therefore it's not a problem with zugos. And finally, the 3rd posuk, the 3rd bracha in Birkas Kohanim, has 7 words. Yiso Hashem ponav elecha v'yosem lecha shalom. And therefore, the 8th should not be a problem of zugos as well. That which we said, therefore, is not going to be a problem of zugos. Says the Gemara, Lo Yamron Ela Le'inin Mazikin. That's in regards to Mazikin of Shadin. Aval Le'inin Kshofim Afilu Tuva Nami Chayshinon. But in regards to sorcery, that would be a problem, even if it was even more than these numbers. The Gemara said, Kiha Dahau Gavra de Garshu Ledvisu. The Gemara tells over about a man who divorced his wife, and then she subsequently then tried to then use sorcery against him. Says the Gemara, Ozil Insibo Lechanua. It says that the wife went and she married somebody who was a store owner. Kol yoma hava ozil v'shasi chamro. It says that every day her first husband went to this store and drank wine. Hava ko'avdo lo leik shofim. She performed witchcraft, sorcery on him. V'lo komahanya lo. It had no effect on him because he was careful that he should not drink cups that would be zugos. Yom echad, however, one day, ishti tuva, he drank a lot. And he lost track of how many cups did he drink. Until 16 cups, he was clear-minded. And he was careful with himself. However, afterwards he lost track, and therefore, because he lost his clarity of mind, he was not able to then be careful. Afikte bezuga, he therefore went out, and he did in Taka had an even amount of koisos. Kihava ozil gas be'ahutaya. When he went out, he came across an Arab traveler. Or Marle, the Arab man said, Gavra katilo hu da'ozil hacha. There's a dead man that is coming here, referring to this first husband. Ozil chabke ledikla. He went and he grabbed a hold of the dekel, the first husband. He hugged a dekel tree. Tzovach dikla upaka hu. The dekel tree became shriveled up, and the first husband he blew up. And therefore, that was a result of the sorcery that the woman that he had divorced did upon him. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Avira, karois vikikarois ein ba mishum zugois. He says plates of cooked food and bread, loaves of bread, there's no such inyan of zugois. It doesn't have any effect. Klola de milsa, the following is the principle. Anything that is completed by man does not have the problem of zugois. However, that which is completed by shomayim, if it's a food item, we are concerned, as we said before, because of davar acher, they were goizer on all food items because they don't know what davar acher was. Chanus ein b'hem mishum zugois. If a person drinks in a store, in a shop, since that's not a makom of kavivus, therefore there's no zugois. We said before in the previous Maisa that the first husband did drink in a shop, in a store, and there was problems. That was not zugois of shading, that was a problem of kishuf by the divorced woman. It goes on to say the following principle: not only our chanos of stores are not having a problem zugois, but also nimlach ein b'hem mishum zugois. Also, when it comes to a person who drinks a cup and then decides to drink a second cup, that does not have any effect. Each one is a new cup. Oreach ein boy mishum zugois. Somebody who is a guest who is brought a cup of wine, then he has the gather of nimlach also in regards to zugois. Even though we had learned previously, which is also a principle that's mofia in Masechet brochos, that when it comes to a guest does not know how much he is going to then be served. Therefore, his bracha rishoina is not required again for a second kois, because there, as an oreach, it's considered to be then somebody who's going to be constantly served. He doesn't know when the amount is going to continue or to stop. So therefore, the stama is that he had a kavana for all of the things that he's being served. Over here, however, when it comes to zugos, we're saying differently. The oreach is like a nimlach, and therefore, if he's served one cup of wine, and he drinks a second cup, since he doesn't know if he's going to be served the second one, it's enough to say a separation between that and the second kois to make, so it said there's no zugos. That should not combine with the first kois. Isha ein ba mishum zugos. Since a woman does not typically drink a lot, nor than one cup of wine, therefore there's not an issue of zugos. However, misha chashuva chashina, since an isha chashuva does drink more than one cup of wine, therefore there would be an issue of zugos. Omer Rav Chinna Bereder Rav Yoshua, Ispars gois mitztarv l'toiva im starv l'ro. Ispar gois is a type of beverage that they would drink in the morning, and it was actually a cabbage-based type of beverage, and it would mitztarif l'toiva and mitztarv l'ro. They would drink it, and if we would drink it, let's say after a cup of 1 cup of wine, 2 cups of wine, then it would mitztarif l'toiva. The hainu would make it so that there's not zugos. If, however, there was only 1 cup of wine that was drunk, and then he drank this ispargus, so then it would not mistarif l'ro to make it into a zugos. Says the Gemara, Omar Ravina Mishmei de Rava. Ravina said in the name of Rava, Zugi lechumra va'amrle zugi lekula. He said in the name of Rava that we say zugi lechumra, and there are those that say zugi lekula, meaning that if it's the first lashon of zuga lechumra is that if he is not sure how much he drank before, so then lechumra he will drink another kois on the tzad that he drank an even amount. This will then mitztaref to make it so that there's not zugos. However, they'll say, what about the tzad that it was indeed an odd amount? So why should this not mitztaref? Because we're saying that it's considered like nimlach, like it's a new type of drinking. However, the Bitzah, on the statement that says that Zuge is lakula, that he will not drink, that means to say that on the tzad that it was odd, so then he does not drink, and therefore he's safe because he doesn't make zugos. However, on the tzad, you might say that it is an even amount, it's already a zug, so now that he doesn't drink, maybe there's a problem. No, it shows that he's not makpid. If he's not particular, we said in the principle, then somebody who's not particular, overly particular, and he's not going to be particular with him as well. If one drinks 2 cups of wine and 1 cup of beer, it's not mitztaref. However, the other way, if it's 2 cups of shechar, of beer, it will mitztaref with 1 cup of wine. The principle is that since the wine is more significant, it will then mitztaref to the thing that is less significant. And therefore, the wine's mitztaref with the sheikhar, but the sheikhar is not mitztaref with the wine. The Gemara brings a siman v'simonach ze klal. It brings from a Mishnah that this is the klal. It's a Mishnah in Kalim that says that when you have certain materials that are susceptible to tuma, there's different shiurim for different things. So therefore, that type of item, that type of material that has a smaller shear will mitztarif to the thing that has a lesser shear, and not vice versa. Kol hamechuber loy min hachamur mimenu tamei, min hakal mimenu tohor. And therefore, the same thing over here is what we're saying. The wine will mitztarif to the sheikha will not mitztarif to the wine. Omer Rav Nachman Amar Rav, trei kami taka v'chad ataka mitztarfi. Two cups of wine that are drunk before the taka, before the table, meaning before the meal, they will mitztarif to the one cup of wine that is during the meal. However, the opposite order, meaning to say, if it was one cup of wine before the table, before the meal, it will not mistarif to the two that are during the meal. And here's the same principle. Since the ikar drinking is during the meal, therefore, when you have one before and two during, over here we're saying, however, you had two before and one during, then we're saying it's mistarif because the one that is during is the ikar, and therefore we say it's mistarif to the other two, whereas if you had one before and two during, the one before, which is less chashuv than the during the meal, will not mitztarif. Maskif Rav Sharsha asks on this principle, at least in regards to the meals. The Gemara says, Otu anon letakune taka kaba'inon? Is it because that we are concerned about the tables being metukon? Ask the Gemara, ask Rav Sharsha, letakune gavra ba'ino. We're concerned about the gavra who's metukon. The gavra kamitaken v'koi. Here we're talking about a person who did drink three. So why are you telling me when he drank one cup before the meal and two during, it's not mitztarif, but if it's two before and one during, it's mistarif? Why is the two before mistarif with the one during? Hare, what are we worried about the table, meaning the meal itself? We're talking about the person. The person drank three. Says the Gemara, the kuli alma. However, everybody agrees. Trei atoka v'chad labasa ataka lo mitztarfi. If you have two during the meal and one after the meal, that is not mitztarif. How does the Gemara know to say that that's for sure true? Because ki hay ma'asid the Rabbi Nachmeni. There was a ma'asid with Rabbi Nachmeni that he was in a certain inn and he drank a zug, and then the table was taken away from him, and he started having ill effects. So he ordered not just another cup of wine to make it so it's izugi, but rather he ordered that they should bring the table back. So you see that indeed, that if it was after the meal, after the table, then indeed it's not going to mitztarif. So therefore that was a raya for this. Rav Yehuda Mar Shmuel kol hamozug mitztarif. Anything that's mixed together, a beverage that's mixed together, is mitztarif. And therefore wine which is diluted with water is mitztarif. Together with another beverage that is also has a mixture, for example, a cocktail. In other words, even though there are two different types of beverages, which you would think is not going to then mitztaref to make a zug, nonetheless, over here the chiddush is that since they both are mixtures, so therefore that's considered to be a common denominator to make them into a zug. On top of kuf yud aleph amid aleph, chutz min hamayim, with the exception of water, which is mixed together. Rabbi Yochanan Mar, afilu mayim, even water that is mixed together, water and water, that will also then be considered to be mitztaref with a zug. In other words, if you have wine and water as one beverage, and then you have water and water, that will also mitztaref, says Rabbi Yochanan. However, he qualifies the statement. Rav Papa qualifies Rabbi Yochanan's statement and says, Lo ya'amar ele chamimi legoy kariri. The krivi legoy chamimi. That's only true that what Rabbi Yochanan said, when it's hot, that goes into cold or cold that goes to hot. That's going to be a mixture of water that will, yes, mitzaref with wine and water. However, aval chamimi legoy chamimi, v'kri legoy chariri loy. But if it's hot that's mixed with hot, or cold that's mixed with cold, then it's not going to be considered to be something that can be mitzaref with another beverage that is mixture.